Welcome to the deep dive. We take these complex sources, stacks of them sometimes, and really try to pull out the insights you need.
Get you properly informed.
Exactly. And today, wow, we have quite the task ahead of us. We're looking at thousands of years of ancient Hindu scripture. And we're trying to synthesize that with, well, the biggest crises we're facing globally right now in the 21st century.
Yeah, we're diving deep into the material around the Kali Yuga.
This prophesied age, an age of decay, of spiritual darkness, as the texts describe it.
It's an amazing journey, really. We're drawing on texts like the Vishnu Purana, the Bhagavata Purana, and the Kalki Purana.
Some heavy hitters there.
Definitely. And when these texts talk about the Kali Yuga, it's important to understand they're not just like marking time on a calendar.
Right, it's more than a date range.
It's more like mapping a state of being, an age defined by this continuous systemic decline, a decline of Dharma.
Yeah, maybe we should clarify Dharma right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because it gets simplified a lot, doesn't it?
It really does. People often think religion or maybe morality.
Yeah.
But here in the Puranas, it's much bigger. It's the essential cosmic order, the sort of framework holding everything together, universe, society, even the individual.
So it's decline. That's what we're really digging into.
Exactly. When Dharma goes down, you see truth, justice, civic duty, all those fundamental human values. They decline right along with it.
Okay.
And what makes this deep dive, I think, so potent is that our source material, it doesn't just stop with the ancient warnings.
No, it builds on them.
Right. It uses them as a foundation for a really modern, surprisingly pragmatic manifesto for action.
So our mission today, then, we want to look at these parallels, these really startling, sometimes kind of unsettling connections between the ancient prophecy.
Some written maybe 2,000 years ago or even more.
And our current reality.
Yeah.
You know, the corruption, the climate issues, social fracturing, all of it. And ultimately, we're aiming for the source's conclusion. That these aren't just signs of doom. They're a precise warning, yes, but also a detailed, actionable call. A call for what the source calls the dawn of renewal.
Okay, let's get into it. This blueprint for collapse and correction.
Yeah, let's unpack it.
But we need to approach this, I think, not with a sense of doom, fatalism.
Right.
But with discernment. Because if these predictions are that precise, then maybe they work like a kind of moral map.
A map showing where the weak spots are.
Exactly. There's institutional weak points where things tend to break down.
Okay, so the scriptures, they start with these foundational characteristics of the Kali Yuga. The source actually labels it the moral inversion.
A powerful phrase.
It is. And when this age kicks off, the Vishnu Purana says these core virtues just disappear. Things like truth, compassion, charity, penance.
The pillars of ethical behavior.
Right. So if those vanish, what fills the vacuum? What rushes in?
Well, this is where the Bhagavata Purana delivers what might be the most penetrating prediction for our time, I think.
Right.
It states pretty definitively that wealth will be considered the only religion.
Wow. Okay, stop there for a second. Wealth as the only religion.
Think about the massive shift that implies for society.
Huge.
If wealth is the only religion, then money.
Yeah.
Money becomes the ultimate judge of what's right and wrong.
So self-interest isn't a bug, it's the feature.
Exactly. It's not a flaw, it's the guiding principle.
And you can see this getting baked into systems, can't you? It's not just about individual greed necessarily.
Right, systemic.
It's like prioritizing GDP growth over, say, the health of the planet, or turning essential things like healthcare, education into purely financial transactions. The force suggests morality doesn't vanish entirely, but it becomes, well, like a performance.
A facade, yeah. Something for PR or social media clout, not a real costly commitment.
Right.
Precisely. And if everything is driven by transactions and self-interest, then what happens to the institutions meant to uphold truth and justice?
They're immediately compromised.
Right. Which brings us straight to the prophecies about institutional rot. The texts say kings and ministers will be corrupt. And crucially, the whole system starts bending towards the wealthy. Power follows money.
The warnings about the justice system specifically, they're quite chilling, aren't they?
They are. The texts warn justice will be bought with wealth. And because of that, courts will be unjust.
And this isn't just like the occasional bribe under the table.
No, it's deeper. It speaks to things like regulatory capture, where industries basically write their own rules.
Or legal systems becoming so complicated, so expensive.
That for the average person, real justice is just out of reach, inaccessible.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Huh.
The source really highlights how delay and expense become the tools, you know? They effectively build the walls of a private courtroom for anyone rich enough to just drag things out forever.
And that erodes public trust. You see it everywhere. Trust in legal systems, in government. It's low.
It is. Public service starts looking less like dharma, less like duty, and more like, well, a path to getting rich or connected. A lucrative exit strategy.
And I wonder, is this inversion of value where money is king, is that what allows the next set of predictions, the ones about intellectual and spiritual life?
How so?
Well, if everything's transactional, why would education or faith be off limits?
They aren't. That's exactly the point. The Parisas were really clear about what happens to knowledge.
What do they say?
They predict that teachers will teach for money, and that knowledge will be pursued for greed. You see that today, right? Learning becomes very instrumental. It's about getting the degree to get the job, to make the money.
Not necessarily about cultivating wisdom or character or just critical thinking for its own sake.
Right. The market ends up dictating what's taught, often prioritizing skills for short-term financial gain over maybe long-term societal well-being.
That raises a question, though. I mean, was there ever really a golden age where knowledge wasn't tied to advancement somehow?
That's a fair question, and the texts, I think, suggest it's about the balance.
Okay.
In the Kali Yuga, the pursuit of wisdom itself becomes secondary. It gets overshadowed by the pursuit of the salary that the diploma unlocks. The primary motive flips.
The motive is reversed. Okay.
And that same kind of reversal, they predict, happens in the spiritual realm, too.
Ah, yes, the source material warns about religion becoming a mere display.
Yeah.
Piety reduced to just putting on a costume or signaling your group identity.
Exactly. And charity, they suggest, will be done purely for fame, not out of genuine compassion.
You definitely see examples of that. Performative philanthropy, or those prosperity gospels where wealth is seen as a sign of divine favor. It brings it right back around to that core idea, wealth being the only religion.
It does. It creates this kind of shallow public square where how things look on the outside matters more than the substance within. The moral authority of these institutions just crumbles because their core commitment, their dharma, has been swapped out for commercial self-interest.
A hollow core.
Pretty much.
Okay, so if the big institutions, the moral economy, are inverted, how does that actually play out in people's everyday lives? The scriptures seem to shift focus here, don't they? From kings and temples down to the nitty-gritty.
They do. They start detailing the fracturing of society right down to the most basic unit, the family.
And those predictions about social bonds, they're pretty grim.
They are, yeah. The texts say marriage will be based purely on wealth and convenience.
So transactional relationships again, not deep connection or shared ethics.
Exactly. And it goes beyond the couple. They warn that siblings will lose affection for each other. And maybe most tragically, that children will cease to respect their parents.
Wow. That maps really uncomfortably well onto some modern trends, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, you think about complex prenups, the isolation maybe of nuclear families, these big generational conflicts we see, often fueled by economics. Even things like elder abuse rates. It suggests that when the wider civic dharma breaks down, that decay seeps right into the home, makes family life brittle, fractured.
Absolutely. The sheer strain of that inverted economy focused on extraction and individual success. It just puts immense pressure on the emotional resources needed for strong family bonds.
There's just no time or energy left for nurturing those deep connections sometimes.
Right. If the main goal is just getting ahead financially.
Then there's the whole health piece, which seems paradoxical at first glance.
Because of modern medicine.
Yeah, medical tech has grown exponentially. But the scriptures predict a decline in human well-being. They warn of shortening human lifespans, diseases increasing.
And this is key. Medicine's becoming ineffective. They even mention deaths during childbirth.
Now, people might push back on the lifespan thing, right?
Yeah.
Statistically, average life expectancy is higher now than 2,000 years ago.
True, but the source material and how it interprets the scriptures seems to focus more on the quality of life and the body's inherent resilience.
Okay.
And think about what we're seeing now, a huge surge in chronic illnesses, cancers, autoimmune disorders, weird viruses, stress-related conditions.
Things that modern medicine often manages, but maybe doesn't truly cure.
Right, often through really expensive lifelong treatments.
So maybe the prophecy isn't about dying younger, statistically, but about a massive increase in managed suffering.
That's one way to look at it, yeah. Living longer, perhaps, but sicker. More dependent on a medical system that's also becoming increasingly complex and, frankly, financially extractive.
That link the texts make between the commercialization of health and medicines becoming ineffective, it's powerful.
It suggests the cures can't keep pace with new diseases. Diseases may be stemming from environmental breakdown, lifestyle stresses, the very conditions the Kali Yuga describes.
Yeah.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, the source argues that the ultimate physical record, the archive of the Kali Yuga, is ecological collapse.
So the destruction of nature isn't separate from the moral decay.
No, it's the inevitable physical manifestation of it.
Yeah, the warnings about the environment, they aren't vague philosophical points. They are shockingly specific.
Frighteningly so. They talk about barren land, irregular rainfall, rivers drying up, trees and birds vanishing, polluted air and water.
It reads like a checklist from a 21st century environmental impact assessment. Climate crisis, habitat loss, pollution. It's all there.
And the texts frame this not just as, like, bad resource management or poor technology.
No.
They frame it as ethical bankruptcy. The source says when we treat the planet like mere inventory, when our consumption constantly outruns our care, then the atmosphere, the rivers, they become the archives of our choices.
Wow. So losing that sense of the sacred in nature, that environmental dharma, leads directly to the instability and loss we see.
That's the argument.
Okay, let's also touch on the predictions about violence and safety, because those seem linked to a society running purely on self-interest too.
Definitely. The normalization of violence is predicted on sort of two levels.
Okay.
First, the personal, everyday level. Theft and robbery will become common. Basic safety erodes.
Right.
Second, the collective level. Violence will occur in the name of religion, and wars will spread across the world.
And modern examples just jump out at you, don't they? Terrorism, organized crime, communal violence whipped up by extremists.
And these huge global conflicts, often masked by nationalism or driven by resource grabs.
It fits the pattern.
Yeah.
And the final piece of this rather grim social puzzle is the status of women.
Yes. The prophecies state very clearly that women will be unsafe.
Unsafe.
That they'll be treated merely as objects of pleasure, and, significantly, that they'll be forced to bear family burdens alone.
That last one really hits hard. Bearing the burdens alone.
It points directly to these persistent global issues, right?
Yeah.
Gender inequality, yes, but also systemic extraction.
How do you mean extract?
Well, when the whole system relies on invisible, unpaid labor, childcare, elder care, just managing the household to basically subsidize the formal economy.
It's extracting value. From women, predominantly.
Exactly. And that economic burden, combined with the warnings about physical safety and objectification, it just reinforces what the source insists on. That the dignity given within the home, especially to women, is maybe the ultimate measure of a civilization's health.
A critical metric.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've walked through this long list of symptoms: moral inversion, institutional decay, social breakdown, ecological crisis. Now let's get to the diagnosis. The source material argues these Kali Yuga patterns aren't unique to one time or place.
No, they're seen as recurring moral flaws. They surface whenever power gets too far ahead of virtue and accountability.
Which lets us look back at history, right? See echoes.
Exactly. It's just this isn't just about ancient India. It's a more universal pattern of how societies can unravel. The source draws a strong parallel with the decay of late Rome.
Ah, okay. How so?
Well, as the Roman Empire got bigger, more centralized, the law started bending more and more towards the powerful, the connected.
Right.
Think about the heavy taxes needed to sustain it all. They were often outsourced to corrupt tax farmers who squeezed the populace.
And what did that do to the idea of civic duty, serving the public good?
It just eroded completely. The public sphere became less about serious debate and engagement and more about spectacle and patronage.
The famous bread and circuses.
Precisely. The elite wanted political office not really to serve, not out of dharma, but to gain wealth, immunity, connections. The rot started subtly, a shift in motive, but eventually it undermined the whole structure.
That parallel to modern politics, where sometimes celebrity or wealth or just media noise seems to outweigh actual policy substance.
Yeah.
It's pretty uncomfortable.
It is. Another key pattern the source identifies is what it calls the industrial bargain.
The industrial bargain. Okay, what's the bargain?
Yeah. The bargain is basically the mindset that lets us treat nature, rivers, forests, the air, and even whole populations of people as just disposable resources.
Production units, inventory.
Exactly. It's that core ethos of extract now, pay later, push the real costs onto the environment or onto future generations.
And the source argues that the moment science or economics reduces living beings to just numbers on a spreadsheet,
Uh-huh.
that habit poisons the legal and ethical frameworks too. It leads straight to those Kali Yuga environmental symptoms we talked about.
Our current climate crisis, in this view, is basically the bill coming due on that centuries-old bargain, the deferred payment.
But even in this bleak picture, the pujas and the source interpreting them, they offer a lesson in resilience, don't they?
Yeah.
They point to historical low points, like the medieval interregnum in Europe.
Yes, periods when the big centralized systems failed spectacularly.
And the lesson from that.
It's critical.
Yeah.
When the major central institutions decay or become just hopelessly corrupt, it falls to local communities, to what the source calls low institutions.
Low institutions, like what?
Things like really local self-governance, mutual aid groups, community land trusts, guilds preserving craft skills, seed savers protecting agricultural knowledge.
Things operating outside the main power structures.
Exactly. Forms of value and knowledge exchange that aren't purely monetary. The source suggests real repair has to start from the ground up. Concrete, local actions building resilience when the top crumbles.
Okay, that makes sense. But it raises the big question. If these symptoms are moral, if the corruption is systemic, what's the fix? What's the corrective architecture we need today?
Right. And this is where the source pivots really decisively from prophecy to essentially policy proposals.
Starting with the climate crisis, the source says something powerful. Climate change is not merely physics, it is ethics made visible.
That ethical framing is crucial. It demands we use dharma, that sense of right order, to align with itta, the underlying cosmic balance.
So for climate, what does that mean practically?
It means first recognizing the justice issue baked into it. The poor, the marginalized, they suffer first and worst from climate impacts, right?
Oh.
Often caused by the consumption patterns of the wealthy. So corrective action needs radical intergenerational accountability, meaning things like net zero targets can't just be fuzzy promises. They need to be robust, enforced with integrity, no loopholes, no offshoring the damage, no just passing the buck to the next generation.
We have to redesign economies to reward restoration, not just extraction.
Yes. Make repairing the ecosystem actually profitable, central to the economy, not some optional add-on.
Okay, next big symptom, systemic corruption. The source calls it the oxygen of graft. If the prophecy is that justice gets bought, what's the structural antidote?
Transparency and accountability. The Civic Manifesto and the source gets incredibly specific here.
Like how?
It demands radical transparency by default, and that's not just posting a PDF somewhere online. It means machine-readable, open API access to all public budgets, procurement contracts, lobbying records, everything traceable. The goal is to make virtue easier, or at least more visible, than corruption.
Make public money followable.
Exactly. And then you have to tackle the political machinery itself.
Campaign finance.
Right. The source calls for serious election finance reform, hard caps on corporate money in politics, public matching funds for small individual donations to broaden the funding base, and total real-time disclosure of who is funding campaigns.
Because if wealth is the only religion,
you have to radically limit the ability of private wealth to just buy political outcomes.
Makes sense. And what about the courts? That issue of delay and expense being the walls of the private courtroom.
The source demands judicial time limits and transparency, basically setting hard deadlines for cases to be resolved, especially in lower courts dealing with everyday issues or public interest cases.
And making that information public.
Yes. Publishing data on case timelines, maybe even judge performance metrics to fight against that chronic justice-denying delay.
Okay. The final case study area was gender injustice. The text predicted women being unsafe, carrying unfair burdens. What's the corrective architecture there?
It has to be both economic and physical, not just talk. The ethical shift is key. Realizing society can't really progress if that progress depends on extracting invisible, unpaid labor from half the population.
That's not advancement, it's exploitation.
Precisely. So the solutions focus on economic parity as a public necessity. Treat high-quality childcare and elder care like essential infrastructure, like roads or bridges.
Mandate universal parental leave. Rigorously enforce equal pay laws.
Yes, and punish companies that hide their salary structures. Make pay transparent.
And beyond the economic, the safety aspect.
The source insists safety and dignity must be non-negotiables. That means fast-tracking justice for gender-based violence with processes centered on the survivor's needs.
And building safety into the environment.
Yeah, things like accessible, reliable public transit, safe public spaces, mixed-income housing design that encourages community oversight, people looking out for each other. It's about making safety and dignity the default experience.
Okay, so even after mapping out this pretty comprehensive picture of collapse, the ancient sources, they don't actually end on a note of despair, do they?
No, consistently they pivot, they promise a turning point. Often this is personified in the figure of the Kalki Avatar.
Kalki, explain that concept a bit.
Well, the Kalki Purana describes Kalki arriving when things get really bad. When the oppressed are crying out, the good guys are silenced, corruption is just rampant.
Society hits rock bottom, basically.
Pretty much. And Kalki is the force, sometimes seen as a warrior on a white horse that comes to destroy a dharma, systemic evil, and restore dharma. To kickstart the next age of truth, the Satya Yuga.
And the source material we're looking at, it interprets Kalki in, like, two ways.
Yeah. On one hand, potentially a literal figure for some traditions, but also, maybe more broadly, as a powerful symbol of truthful force. The crystallization of collective will demanding righteousness. The idea is the world becomes ripe for rectification when the pain of sticking with the broken system finally outweighs the effort needed to change it.
The tipping point.
Exactly. But, and this is crucial, that moment of deep crisis, that's also when dangerous opportunists pop up. False saviors.
And the sources warn about this.
Very specifically, they give a list of red flags of counterfeit saviors that we really need to watch out for, especially today.
Like what? What are the red flags?
First, watch out for any movement built around the worship of personality over principle,
Right.
where the leader's ego, their charisma, becomes the main thing, not the actual ideas or ethics.
Okay, personality cults. Got it.
Second, secrecy around money and power. If you can't see where the funding comes from or how decisions are really made, that's a huge red flag. The intent is likely compromised.
Transparency matters there, too.
Absolutely. Third, look for the tendency to scapegoat the weak, blaming immigrants, minorities, the poor, while simultaneously cozying up to the rich and powerful.
A genuine reformer lifts up the marginalized, right? Yeah. Doesn't punch down while sucking up.
Exactly. A true reformer seeks justice for the lowest, not alliances with the highest.
And the last red flag.
Maybe the most relevant for our whole discussion on institutions. A counterfeit savior will show profound disdain for independent courts and press.
They want to dismantle the checks and balances.
Precisely. They attack the very things designed to hold power accountable, wanting to replace them with their own raw authority. A real renewal movement has to welcome scrutiny, welcome independent judgment.
So the big lesson here is, don't just sit around waiting for a single hero on a white horse.
Right. Renewal has to be authored by citizens, by collective action.
Which brings us to the practical path, the how-to for getting out of the Kali Yuga mess.
Yeah.
What's the actual architecture that replaces that crumbling foundation of self-interest?
It's laid out in the source's Civic Manifesto, which details 7 pillars for renewal. And these aren't just vague hopes, they're concrete policy demands aimed squarely at restoring Dharma in practice.
Okay, 7 pillars. Let's break them down. Pillar number 1.
Truth as infrastructure.
Truth as infrastructure. What does that mean on the ground?
It means making verifiable, open, machine-readable data the absolute default for everything government does. Not just posting a confusing PDF budget online.
No, like standardized tagged data.
Exactly. Data that researchers, journalists, ordinary citizens can easily access and analyze, query it instantly. It also means government communication has to be in plain language, so policies can actually be understood and debated by everyone.
Because if you can't even agree on the basic facts.
You can't hold power accountable. Simple as that.
Okay, pillar 2.
Justice that arrives on time. This hits that prophecy about justice being bought through delay head-on.
Oh.
Hard, enforceable timelines for court cases, especially in the lower courts that handle most people's issues, and especially for cases impacting public trust. And crucially, the source argues we need to treat legal aid and basic legal information as a public utility.
Like water or electricity.
Yeah. A core service the state provides so that cost isn't a barrier keeping people from justice. Dismantle that wall of expense.
Got it. Pillar 3 sounds like a big one. Economies of care, not exhaustion.
This is fundamental. It's about redefining what we value economically. It means actively investing in things like childcare, elder care, mental health support, ecological restoration, treating them as core public goods.
Not just nice-to-haves, but essential.
Essential. And reforming tax codes and subsidies to reward things like repair, reuse, durability, instead of just constant extraction, consumption, and throwing things away.
Building an economy that sustains people and planet doesn't just burn them out.
That's the goal.
Pillar 4.
A deeper commitment to participatory democracy.
Going beyond just voting every few years.
Way beyond. Integrating things like citizens' assemblies. You take randomly selected but informed citizens to deliberate on complex, long-term issues like climate policy or judicial reform to get recommendations that aren't stuck in partisan gridlock. And also things like mandatory participatory budgeting at the city level, giving local people real say over how tax money gets spent in their own neighborhoods.
Making democracy tangible, local. Rooting Dharma there.
Exactly.
Pillar 5 takes us back to the environment. Ecology as sacred law. Moving past that industrial bargain.
This demands radical accountability for environmental harm. Things like establishing legal rights of nature for vital ecosystems, rivers, forests, giving them standing in court to be defended against abuse.
Giving nature a voice in the legal system.
Effectively, yes. And making the polluter pays principle real and fully enforced. No more externalizing the costs of pollution onto society while companies pocket the profits. The true cost has to be in the transaction.
Okay. Pillar 6. Dignity by design.
This is about shaping our physical world, our infrastructure, to reinforce respect for people. Public transit systems, for example, need to treat riders like valued citizens, not just cargo. Safe, timely, accessible for everyone.
Thoughtful urban planning, too.
Yes. Things like quiet zones, prioritizing pedestrians, designing mixed-income housing that actually fosters community, not isolates people. Making the physical environment itself promote belonging and equity.
And the final pillar, number 7.
A culture of mercy and measure.
Mercy and measure. What's that combine?
It acknowledges that policies aren't enough. You also need ethical character, a certain kind of public discourse. It means funding strong, independent public media committed to truth and analysis. Making media literacy a core, mandatory part of education from a young age.
Teaching people how to think critically and compassionately.
Exactly. Cultivating both judgment and empathy in how we talk to each other.
Okay, those 7 pillars are a hefty blueprint for systemic change. But the source also insists change starts smaller, right? With the individual.
It does. It argues the most profound shifts begin with personal choices, personal commitments. It lists specific personal vows as antidotes to that Kali Yuga drift.
What kind of vows?
They're simple, disciplined acts of character, really. First, consumption restraint. Just buying less. Choosing things that last. Learning the skill and patience to mend things instead of replacing them instantly.
Pushing back against the throwaway culture.
Directly. Second, ethical communication. Verifying before amplifying speech, especially online. Just refusing to jump on the outrage bandwagon or spread stuff you haven't checked.
That small choice of whether to hit share
is actually a unit of dharma, the source suggests. A tiny choice with big collective impact.
What else?
Crucially, tides of time for service. Dedicating a certain amount of time each week, regularly to local service. Mentoring, community gardening, volunteering at a legal aid clinic, whatever fits.
Rooting your personal dharma in real, unpaid action.
And finally, a commitment to pair every technical skill with a moral one. Using whatever expertise you have, coding, accounting, teaching, building with fairness, patience, and deep listening. Bringing ethics into your daily work.
Okay, so we have the big pillars, the personal vows. How do we know if any of this is actually working? Are there milestones, thresholds of renewal?
Yes. And importantly, the source provides hard, measurable metrics. This isn't just about feeling better, it's about accountable results.
Like what? Give us some examples.
We'll know the shift is real when, for instance, we see homicide rates halved within a decade. That's a concrete sign of increased social stability, less violence.
Okay, that's measurable. What about the justice system?
We need to see case disposal times in lower courts consistently under 90 days. Proof that justice isn't being stalled into meaninglessness anymore.
And environmentally?
Real, documented reductions in air and water toxicity levels. Not just targets, but actual measured improvements showing we're treating ecology as sacred law.
And for gender equality?
The gender pay gap must close to statistical insignificance, demonstrating that we've stopped extracting unpaid value from care labor. These metrics turn hope into actual, enforceable public goals.
Hard targets.
Exactly. #OutTagOut.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive into the Kali Yuga prophecies. It's been pretty extraordinary, hasn't it? The clarity of that ancient diagnosis, the moral inversion, the corruption, the ecological decay. It's hard to deny the echoes today.
It really is.
But I think the most powerful takeaway, for me at least, is that the ultimate message isn't despair. It's not about just waiting for some cataclysm or some savior.
Yeah, definitely not.
It's actually a demand
Yeah.
for clear-eyed discernment, seeing things as they are,
Yeah.
and then immediate, disciplined, pragmatic action. Implementing that civic manifesto we talked about.
Absolutely. The ultimate measure of whether we're actually moving out of the Kali Yuga,
Yeah.
it isn't some date on a cosmic clock, it's character. Character demonstrated in a civic context.
Character.
As the source puts it, the end of this age is authored by character, by citizens who choose the long, patient work of repair over just short-term applause or performative gestures.
And by leaders who genuinely see power as a responsibility, alone from the public, not as personal loot.
Exactly. By committing to that measurable, merciful, long-haul work. That's how prophecy potentially becomes a pathway, a map we can actually follow.
So the final thought for you, the listener. If prophecy really is a kind of moral map, pointing out the pitfalls in the path forward, what's one tangible, measurable action you could take? In your own community, in your industry, maybe even just in your own household?
Yeah, whether that's pushing for more transparency in local budgets, advocating for better public transit, volunteering time for legal aid, or really digging into economic parity where you work.
What's one step that aligns with this vision of restoring Dharma, of building accountability? Think about that next choice, that small act of character,